Okay, so here's the final part of this particular unit, and it describes the subgroup that I was the lead of, requirements and use case subgroup. So we have most of the some of the usual verbiage at the top about working with industry, academia, and government, and we're trying to find requirements, and the process of getting the requirements was done by first getting use cases and extracting requirements from use cases. This is not the only way of getting requirements, but it's a way that is documentable. Because once you have a use case, which is sort of by definition real and is documented, then if it has requirements, you know why you have that requirement, and if you don't meet that requirement, you know what you're going to lose. So we gathered our 51 use cases. We found some requirements. One little minor little difficulty, which will be corrected in hopefully as the process moves on, is in some sense those requirements should drive the reference architecture, but the requirements really didn't finish until towards the middle of September, and so they little really couldn't drive the technology, the reference architecture. So the reference architecture which should in some sense have followed the requirements process, was done in parallel with the requirements process. That was the correct decision, but it has some consequences. Um, so at the time, this was a slide for essentially summarizing what we did on September 30th. At the time, we decided at September 30th, we agreed to actually a next step was to look at general patterns. Some of that I've already done and will be presented in the next unit when we look at the different features of the use cases. Something which has not been done is to validate the requirements and reference architecture by implementing some of these patterns. So the idea of the patterns is, and we actually have not actually implemented any patterns, so in some sense that is clearly still to do, is it is not realistic to develop, to actually implement in a generic fashion a real application. You need to find an application paradigm or pattern which you implement in generic fashion, which can be done relatively simply, and use that to evaluate the reference architecture. So a key part of maybe the major part of the whole use case working group, and maybe its only contribution to knowledge, was the development of a one-page Word document which was a use case template. It was the empty template was one page. The full templates can be many pages. So this just defines what we collect for each use case: the title, the area where that use case lives in, the military or retail or artificial intelligence, the people doing the building the use case definition, which may or may not be the same people who actually execute it, the people involved, um, which will be the users of this use case, the developers of the use case, and the supporters of the use case, the goals of the use case, find out fundamental scientific results, description of the use case, how you got those scientific results, and then after these general rules, we come into some of the technical details. Um, and here was the discussion of how it's done today, what the compute system's like, what the storage is like, what the network is like, what the software is like. And then we now have, that's the sort of the infrastructure. Now we come to the actual big data itself, where the data comes from, the size, the velocity, the variety. Here's the three major V's, and there's the as well as we also have the variability, the rate of change of the data. Which so here we use variety to describe how it the number of different types of data, and the variability is the change in the size and nature of the data, and to what extent is constant in time. Then we come to veracity, which is the robustness and the semantics of the data. We have the visualization of the data, the quality. Quality is and veracity address different aspects of saying correctness issues, one at the semantic level and one at the actual data value level. Then we have the actual types of data, and here we have a pretty important field, the actual analytics, which is being used or should be used. After these description, we then have the data challenges. These are also free field comments. Anything comments on the importance of mobile phones? We know mobile phones are growing in importance, at least in the real world, and the PCs are declining in use, and mobile phones are dramatically increasing. Although this lecture's been done on the PC, so still PCs have some value. And by PCs, I meant any laptop or desktop. This is a laptop. And then we have the security and privacy issues, which is cross-cutting, so we put it outside the main details. And then any comments they would have on the special features. And then at the end, some URLs and the final free field comment, which was rarely filled in. So we have 26 fields, and we have 51 completed surveys, which we will come to in the next unit. And we divide them into these broad areas: government operation, four of the 51, 8 of the 51 were commercial use cases, 3 were defense, 10 were in healthcare and life sciences. Some of those, in some sense, they weren't necessarily research applications. They could actually be operational applications in the healthcare industry. So there are some commercial things. Then we have a pretty exciting area, deep learning, where a lot of the progress has been made in analytics, and then social media analysis. Those are 2 very hot areas which we join together. Then we have 4, which I call the ecosystem for research, because they describe general features, cross-cutting use cases. You'll see what they are when we come to them. They're a bit of a grab bag, but when you have use cases need ecosystem. I mean, research in big data needs an ecosystem. Then we have 5 in astronomy and physics, and 10 in sort of earth, environmental, and polar science, and then 1 in energy. These numbers should not be taken seriously as to the importance of big data in certain areas. They just represent who filled in our form, and this was all done over roughly 6 weeks, because we didn't really have the form till the middle of July. And then we started winding down the process at the end of August, because we had to summarize it and things like that. So this is 6 weeks of intense activity to gather these use cases.